All right, so here we go, guys. Chapter 18, Section 2. We're going to bang through some notes. We're talking about the reign of terror in the or during the time of the French Revolution. We are after the main part of the revolution. We've seen the king get killed, right? How was the king killed? What'd they use? Nobody knows. Nobody knows the name of that thing? The thing that comes to, yes, it's called a guillotine or a guillotine. You might hear it referred to as, right? A guillotine, a guillotine. All right. We see this tool, I'll put that in parentheses, tool of the revolution really start to rear its head, no pun intended, during this time of the revolution. They start using it in the streets. They start, basically blood pours in the streets, and it is to intimidate. It is to keep people in line. Remember, the group that was formed was the Committee of Public Safety. That is kind of where we're at. And we started talking about, if you remember the name Robespierre, right? That's a name that came out. He rises to power, and we see power gets to his head a little bit and eventually loses or causes him to lose his head. That's where we're going to get to eventually. So we're going to talk about the Reign of Terror. For roughly a year, during 1793 and 1794, the Committee of Public Safety took control. So this is only about a year. So think about this, right? We just went through about a year. Think about how much can change in a year, right? How much needs to, you guys have probably never experienced, well, you've definitely never experienced what you experienced in the last year, but most people have never experienced change that quickly, right? You probably hear people talk about it a lot, like, a lot can change. Things can change overnight. You never know. In our country, we do have this luxury of freedom, but we saw how that changed pretty quickly in the past year, right? We were on lockdown. We were not allowed to go out. We were not allowed to go in a restaurant. We were not allowed to do it. We were not allowed. You had to wear it. All these things just went away very quickly in 1 year. So when you hear about history and you go, man, all that can change in a year, you've seen it happen. Now, not to this extreme, but again, a year. A year seems very quick, but a lot can happen. So, Committee of Public Safety acted to defend France from foreign enemies and rebellions at home. The committee set in motion an effort that came to be known as the Reign of Terror. Underline that. Now, when you hear the word terror, what do you think of? Fear. That's a great, yeah, most people go to fear. I think terror is a step above fear, if not 2 or 3 steps above fear. Have you ever watched, I love horror movies. All right, I love horror. I think they're funny. Some of them are a bit disturbing, yes, but I've watched them my whole life, probably a little bit of why I'm a little nutty. But my oldest son kind of likes them now too, so I kind of pick and choose what ones we watch together. I love haunted houses. I love all those things. When you watch those kind of movies or you go to a haunted house, some people are beyond fear in those movies and in those haunted houses, right? Like they literally cannot move. They literally cannot do anything. If somebody touches them, what do? Right? They go insane. Fear is like, oh man, I don't like the dark. I'm a little bit afraid of the dark. But if I had to walk into a dark room, guess what I could do? I could walk into a dark room. But if I was in terror, like if I was terrorized, I wouldn't. I couldn't move into a dark room. I wouldn't be able to even function. That is terror. All right? Think of the word terrorist, right? What do terrorists try to accomplish? They try to do something that is so horrific, so awful, as to bother some people so badly that are still alive to do what? To be terrorized, to do nothing. They don't want to go out to the store. They don't want to go out, right? They'll blow up a bomb in a public shopping center. Why? So that people will stop going where? To the shopping center, because it could blow up, right? Yes, it could, but it also might not. But they've put this fear, such an intense terror, that it stops you from living. Does that make sense? So the Reign of Terror was this intense, I'll use the word fear because I think we understand that a little bit, but it's beyond that. It literally, people were like looking over their shoulders all the time. All the time, okay? During the Reign of Terror, nearly 40,000 people were killed. Whoa. This is in 1 year. All right? Many by the guillotine, right? Or guillotine, however you might hear that pronounced. Most executions were held in places that had openly rebelled against the authority of the National Convention. Why might they do that? Why might they be killing people in these places that openly rebelled against the National Convention, which was in charge. To set an example. You see what happens when you go against us? Look at what happens. Maybe don't do it again, right? All right? Sometimes I tell my own son, like my oldest son will be like, man, you're a lot harder on me than you are on my brothers. Yeah, so they don't do it, right? I'm setting an example. So you're the dum-dum that got caught. I don't want them to be the dum-dum. So now they'll think twice if I punish you harsher than them. They won't do it then. Do you understand? So we see 40,000 people, a lot of them in these places that had openly rebelled. The Committee of Public Safety decided to make an example of the city of Lyons, or Lyons, right? However, you might hear it pronounced a couple different ways. 1,880 people in that city alone were executed. 1,880 people in one city. In Western France, the revolutionary armies were brutal in defeating rebel armies. Perhaps the most notorious act of violence occurred in Nantes, or Nantes, right? Where victims were executed, listen to this, by being sunk in barges in the river. Now, I don't know about you. I've never drowned in my life, right? I don't know if you've ever experienced being held underwater longer than you really want to be held underwater. It is awful, I'm sure, to die by drowning, right? I'm sure it's awful to die almost anyway. All right, I've never died, all right, obviously. But drowning probably sucks. It's probably really bad because there's this, you don't immediately die. The boat starts sinking. You know what? I'm going to die. So there's that. On top of it, as you take your last breath, then what? Eventually you're holding, oh God, and then, right? And then you do the, now, I can't imagine what that's like, and nor do I ever want to, and I'm not making light of it. I know people who have known people that have passed from drowning. I'm sure it's awful. But that is one way that they intimidated people during the Reign of Terror. You can now, I'm trying to give you a glimpse of what it would have been like to be ruled like this. Okay? To be ruled like this. You are in constant fear. You will definitely second guess even speaking against the government at the time. Because what if it gets back to them? Right? What if it gets back to them? So, people from all classes were killed during the Reign of Terror. About 15% of the victims were from clergy and nobility. The rest were from the bourgeoisie and peasant classes. So in essence, what that means is you can write it off to the side. No one was safe. No one was safe. I feel like in our environment today, I might ask you a question about this. In our environment today, if you type something onto Facebook, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or white or black or Asian or that, whatever you are, it almost, doesn't it feel like today, if you pay attention to any news, it doesn't matter who you are, you could be in trouble for saying it. No one is above getting caught doing something at this point, especially in the world that you're growing up in, right? The world I grew up in didn't have social media. The world I grew up in didn't have cameras everywhere. Me and my friends could get away with a lot. We could do dumb things, but now I tell my children, act like you're being filmed all the time, which means act like you know how to act what? All the time, right? Some people think, I only said I didn't mean it. Well, bye. You got caught. You said it, right? So think about that kind of a mentality. Anybody can get caught and get done. Back then, killed. Today, you'll hear the terms cancel culture. Right, that's all over the news. Cancel culture, cancel culture, cancel culture. They're going to get canceled. They're going to get canceled. They're going to get canceled. That, in essence, is what you see. Luckily, we're not getting beheaded. But a lot of people are losing their jobs, their livelihoods, their homes, their ability to get another job, right? I've talked with teachers over the past couple of years that are afraid to teach or because they're afraid they might say something. They might say something. That's scary, right? That's kind of a terror almost. Well, yeah, but you're a good person. What are you going to say? I don't know, but I'm afraid I might. I'm afraid I might say something that might get misinterpreted. You just never know. It's that type of mentality. No one's safe, right? Back in the day, you would think, well, if I'm rich or I'm a noble, I can say whatever I want, right? Would a king ever have to think he was going to get in trouble? Heck no. Now they do. What's going on with the royals over in another country? What's going on? Anybody know? Did anybody hear Miss Markle and her husband talk? Somebody's go ahead. Alex, go ahead.
The royal family in England is accused of being super racist because the kid of Prince Harry, I think his name is mixed.
Yes.
And all the old white men and women that are royals are freaking out about it. How it's gonna react to have a half-black kid in the family.
Now that's exactly what has been reported. We don't know if there's any truth to that per se. Again, I'm not saying there is or isn't truth. I'm not reporting on it. I'm not investigating it. I don't know. 100% honesty here, I could care less about the royals. I've never cared. Some people are like, the wedding's on. But in a family that is, you would think, above any type of trouble, it's the king, the queen, the royals of another country are now being ripped apart around the world because somebody said they're racist. They just said it. There's no, again, I'm putting up the quotations. There's no proof of it yet, but we're seeing this type of mentality kind of come around. It doesn't matter who you are, what level of richness or not, you can still get in trouble. And that's what was going on during the Reign of Terror, that no one was safe. All right? It permeated all classes. The Committee of Public Safety took other steps to control France and to create a new order called the Republic of Virtue. You can underline that. The committee tried to provide some economic controls by establishing price limits on goods considered necessities, such as food, fuel, clothing. So, this was only going to cost so much so that everybody would have a chance to get it. But the controls didn't work very well. The National Convention also pursued a policy of de-Christianization. Right? The word saint was removed from street names. Churches were pillaged or closed. Priests were encouraged to marry. So they tried to take religion out of everything. Okay? Kind of think of the separation of church and state type of mentality. But instead of just allowing it to be, they decided to basically get rid of. All right? Like our government is separation of church and state, right? We don't have one world or one country religion. But they don't make you not practice a religion in our country. You can be Muslim, you can be Catholic, you can be Christian, you can be, Buddhist, any number of different religions that you want to be. But in this situation, they were de-Christianizing. They were getting rid of all Christianese, if you will, like all types of Christianity they were getting rid of. In November 1793, a public ceremony dedicated to the worship of reason was held. The worship of reason was held at the Cathedral of Notre Dame. So one of these major churches in the Catholic faith, right? They decided not only would they make people not practice Catholicism, but that they would hold another type of sermon in their church. This celebration of reason, the ability of humans to rise up and be good in and of themselves. Okay, so in essence, they're really poo-pooing religion at this point, and I'm putting that very nicely. Okay. A new calendar was also adopted. Years were no longer numbered from the birth of Christ. If you didn't know that, right, the man Jesus Christ, whether you believe that he was God or not, that he claimed to be, or that the Bible claims that he was, did you ever see the letters BC? They meant before Christ, right? And then AD was Anno Domini, which is Latin for basically after Christ. All right, that's another way to after the year of our Lord, okay? So they got rid of that. They started a whole new calendar. Okay, so the first day, September 22nd, 1792, which was the first day of the French Republic, is when they started their new calendar. They acted as though the rest of time didn't exist. All right, just we're out of that religious type of stuff is what they said. Sundays, church holidays were eliminated. However, de-Christianization failed to work because France was still overwhelmingly Catholic. So you might try to take the Christian out of the area or the Catholic out of the area, but the Catholic was still there and they were still practicing. Think of China today. China is a communist country that does not allow Christianity, but it is one of the number one countries of Christians, right? So it's still a practiced faith in their country. If you're caught reading the Bible or praying or holding a church service, a Christian church service, you will be put in prison or worse, possibly. And I have a friend, he goes and does missions work over there. So I have some pretty intimate knowledge of what happens over there. We're not allowed to text him messages that say anything about Jesus or Christianity because if a government official sees it, they're in trouble. But the religion over there is still alive and well, if you will, right? That's exactly what was happening here. Women were actively involved in the revolution, important to know. Women observed sessions of the National Convention. They made their demands known. 1793, 2 women founded the Society Underline of Revolutionary Republican Women. That's a mouthful. Society of Revolutionary Republican Women. This group was made up of working class women. They were ready to defend the new French Republic if the need arose. Many men, however, continued to believe that women should not participate in political and military affairs. So we still see this situation where everybody wants revolution, everybody wants change, but a lot of people don't really want change. Right? I always call it a lot of talk, right? And not necessarily a lot of action. Now we were seeing a lot of action, but not the right action. A lot of death, a lot of scared people, a lot of that, but not necessarily good change per se. All right? Any questions about the Reign of Terror? If I asked you to compare it from then to today, you think you could? What do you think? Yes, no? I gave you some examples, right? How about out there? Are there any questions? I'm trying to kind of look in both places, make sure I'm getting everybody. The teaching online thing is kind of a pain sometimes. All right. I think it's a pretty understandable concept, the Reign of Terror. If I were to ask you to compare it to today, you should be able to at this point, right? People living in fear, especially with the past year that you guys have grown up in. A lot of people are scared. A lot of people still are scared. All of a sudden, the government comes out with yesterday, our governor, next year, schools are open. How many people do you think yesterday went, huh? What? I'm not saying whether they're right or wrong or whether the governor's right or what I'm saying is every day you get a new piece of information. What do you have to do? You got to, that's the best word you could use. You got to process it. You got to look at it through a lens, right? And we all have different lenses that we try to look at as a parent, as a teacher, as a worker, as a student, we all have to process these things. And if you're confused, confusion leads to usually fear. Fear usually births terror, right? Remember, I said it's kind of a step up. So if you can't process things, if you're not really understanding things, that's why I always encourage you out there, you in here, educate yourselves. Learn about it. Why are we able to open again next year? Why is it okay? Should we still be afraid? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like all of those things, I encourage you, your families, don't just listen to somebody telling you. I can stand up here and tell you anything. Doesn't mean I'm right. I would hope I'm right. I would hope I'm teaching you good things, right? But learn for yourself, right? When the governor comes out with something new, I start to do research. Oh, I wonder why we're okay to go back, right? I wonder why it's okay that we can be in school. I wonder why. Oh, okay, it seems good. Or, whoa, wait a minute. Why is this? Why is that? It's always good to use your own brains to question things. And that's why we educate. Not so that you just learn facts, but so that you learn how to what? Process things yourselves. Look at your own lives and how you would want things to happen in your life. Do you understand? So it's good things. It's interesting things. I don't know that I would 100% want to be growing up, at your age in this time period, depending on maybe your situation, your families, who's helping you gauge these things. I hope as you've lived through this past year, you have had people that have helped you gauge these things and learn these things. But it is difficult. I've watched my own kids struggle with it, right? We've had to have very difficult conversation with them, explaining to them stuff that's going on and how it's difficult to understand why this, why that. My son, a 12-year-old yesterday, was asking me about, every day if we're on the news, and we try not to do it too much around the kids, but racism, right? It gets thrown out all the time now, correct? When I was growing up, it wasn't really thrown around like that. Now, I have a 12-year-old go, Dad, why in the world would anybody care about the skin color of somebody? My answer to him is, you're right, they shouldn't, right? And that's because we've raised him that way, right? We have raised him in that light, to think that way. And so we've helped him process this, but now he's asking those questions for himself, right? Why? Why would that happen? So he has to now process it through that lens of his own learning. I wonder why anybody would think that way about anybody. That's really weird. Well, how does that, he actually asked this question. How does that situation have anything to do with skin color, right? So there was an issue that was brought up, right? Does that make sense? I don't remember exactly what the issue was. But the issue was brought up, and somebody said, well, that has to do with racism. And his attitude was, well, how does that have anything to do with that? And so that's a conversation we get to have, right? Oh, well, here's why people might think that way. Here's why people might think that way. But that's a 12-year-old, right? When I was 12, what the heck was I doing? Playing sports and running around with friends. All right. Luckily, I had good people that were raising me in good ways that I could process things a little bit. But think about growing up during the reign of terror. Could you imagine being a kid walking out in the streets and seeing people getting guillotined? And then a parent having to try to explain that? Well, here's why that happens. Or 1,800 people being drowned? Whoa. Just those are crazy things. So, good notes. The bell's going to ring in a couple minutes. I'm going to stop that right there.